not rocket science. It's just beer. Doesn't have to be spooky. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Beer Feelings podcast, where together we are going to indulge in life and craft beer. My name is Natalie Jones. I am your craft beer loving gal pal of a host, and I am so excited that you have decided to join me today, because today we are going to talk about the magical little ingredients that go into our favorite beverage, or hopefully soon to be favorite beverage, which is beer. Now, just a quick disclaimer, this episode is going to cover the absolute bare bones basics so that if there's any beer newbies out there, they can be informed, they can feel empowered and excited about beer. So if you have been drinking beer for a while, just know we're going to skip a lot of what goes into beer, and that's okay. We're going to start with these little bite-sized chunks. I want to make sure that we're making beer accessible for absolutely everyone. So let's get started, shall we? So I like to think about beer kind of like baking bread. Is this because initially I thought of it as bread water? Perhaps, but actually there's a lot in common between the process of brewing beer and baking. So that's what we're going to use as our example kind of throughout this episode. So basics of bread, right, is we add flour. We add in a little bit of water so it can move around a little bit easier. We add some yeast in there at the right temperature. We let it rise and we add some kind of seasoning. We bake it, we broil it, we toast it. And then in the end, we get a lovely loaf of bread, right? Not rocket science. Very, very similar with beer. So we're going to have the same grain, yeast, and water to let everything mix together. And really the only difference, number one, we're going to use different kinds of grains and yeast, right? Or else we would literally have bread water. But then instead of seasoning it with maybe salt or sugar, we're going to season it with the hops. So let's dive into each of those ingredients. So first, the biggest component of beer, just from a volume perspective, is going to be water. Think about water as a little hot tub for all the magic to happen in. The next ingredient is going to be grains. Most of the time, the grains that are used are barley, but we have a lot of different variations that we can play around with here. We can add in wheat, we can add in rice, we can add in corn, and we can adjust how toasty all of those are to change the flavor of the ultimate beer. So grains are in there to produce sugar for the yeast to consume. And then the after product of that, the yeast do little burps of alcohol. So in bread, what the yeast produces are little air bubbles so that it rises. Only difference there is in beer, the yeast, in fact, will produce perhaps our favorite part of beer, which is the alcohol content. And then, like I mentioned before, hops are in there to give it a lovely smell, to alter the taste, instead of salt and sugar that you would typically find in bread. We're doing good so far? Not rocket science. It's just beer. Doesn't have to be spooky. So now you might be asking, are there really only 4 ingredients in most beers? Or it sounds like, maybe from what you've heard or what you've seen at the liquor store, there are so many different kinds out there. How on earth does that happen? Great question. So we can change the flavor and we can change the style a few different ways. We're going to stick with our bread analogy. So the first way that we can change things up is by changing the ingredients, right? So if I were to make bread, I could add in everything seasoning on top. Actually, that sounds really delicious right now. I've been on an everything seasoning kick, so maybe I'll have to make some bread, but I could add in everything seasoning and have like a really hearty bread, or maybe add in some more whole grain flour and have something that would be like really nice for a sandwich. Or I could add in a little cinnamon sugar swirl and make it more of a dessert bread, maybe something that's better for French toast. Same thing with beer. Really, we could change out any of the ingredients. We could change one grain for another. We could change out one strain of yeast for another. Maybe we could add in multiple kinds of yeast instead of one kind. And of course, we can change the hops. What I think is so interesting is some breweries will even be super particular about their water because the different mineral contents is going to change how the beer tastes. So that's choice number one on how do we get different styles of beer. Straight up, change the ingredients. The next thing we can do is we can change the way that we make it. So once more, let's go back to that bread example. And I want you guys to imagine a dinner roll and then imagine a bagel. Both of them are going to be plain, like think bare bones. And I'm sure you can imagine one is super soft and flaky, one is more chewy, but both of them use almost exactly the same ingredients at their very, very base recipes. However, dinner rolls, right? We mix it in a big bowl. We let this big blob of dough rise. We punch it down a few times. That's always my favorite part of baking. And then we shape them and we bake them. And then bagels, what we do is you make a similar dough, you let it rise. I'm less familiar with bagels. I just like to eat bagels. And then you boil them. And that's how they get kind of that chewy texture. And then after that, you bake them. So just in changing a few different things as far as heat, as far as process, we get two totally different items that taste very different. Same thing with beer. What we can alter along the brewing line is the order in which we combine all of the ingredients, the temperature in which we cook all of the ingredients. Do we add in the hops in the beginning and we let them cook along the way? Do we add the hops in the end? That lets them be a little more floral because the oils don't get as cooked out. So we can make all of these little changes and end up with beers just as different as bagels and dinner rolls, which I probably should have eaten before recording this particular podcast because this is making me quite hungry. So those are the two main methods that we can alter the 4 ingredients to get different styles of beer. But there is a third way that's definitely pushing the boundaries of what traditional brewing is versus not, which is adding in extra stuff to the mix. So let's go back to our bagel example. Different than the dinner roll, right? We can make it a whole grain bagel versus a normal bagel, so we can change out the core ingredients. Or we could sprinkle some extra delicious shit on top. So maybe it is some everything seasoning. Maybe it's a little cinnamon crunch on top. Oh my gosh, guys, I'm quite hungry. I'm going to have to go get some bagels. But the extra stuff on top does make it almost its own little dish, but it's not part of the core bagel. Same exact thing with beer. We can add in fruits. We can add in spices. We can add in wood chips. We can add in chili peppers. Actually, chili pepper beer is quite delicious. And that's going to, once more, just expand the possibilities, the grand beer adventure that we are about to go on. So those are your beer basics. Today, we talked about beer ingredients. We talked about different ways that we can alter those ingredients and change up the recipe to get all the different styles out there. On a later episode in this podcast, actually a whole bunch of episodes, we are going to dive into different specifics about particular styles of beer. So we're going to talk into what makes them special. We're going to talk about where they came from. We're going to talk about which type of people enjoy that beer. So like if you're a big margarita drinker, you'd probably like this. If you like barbecue, you'd probably like that. So I'm going to give you all the secrets. I'm definitely not going to short you guys all of that juicy information. I just need a lot more time to talk about it. So that is going to be it for this episode. If you are enjoying going along this beer journey with me, though, I'd invite you to check out the Beer Feelings Relaxation Kit. These kits come equipped with everything you need to have the ultimate boozy and bougie beer spa nights at home. Each season, we release a totally different box, and we focus on helping you create a unique seasonal beer experience. Right now, our summer kit is available, and it is all about glowing up for a fun night out on the town. And it includes a specialty Beer Feelings Tiku glass, a beer-infused chili lime salt that you can use to spice up your glass and rim it with, a beer-infused sugar scrub for your hands and feet, a beer-infused hand and foot salve. And guys, oh my gosh, I use that hand and foot salve every day and it smells fabulous. But if this sounds like your kind of thing and you're ready to keep the beer party going with me, go ahead and head on over to beerfeelings.com/kits and order yours. It will ship straight to you, speedy, quick, and we can keep this party going. That is it for this episode, my friends. Make sure to tune back in next time for our next craft beer adventure. Cheers.